Hello historians, and welcome to another Purple Shirt History. In this video, we'll go over the international option, China and Japan, 1912 to 1945. I'll be honest, I'm mainly going to go over Japan. I live in China right now, and this period in history is very sensitive, so...
I don't want that smoke.
You'll see all the keywords and points from the syllabus, but I'm mainly going to keep my commentary about Japan. I'm recording this in the exam season, so I wish everyone lots of luck on their exam. If you find these videos useful, please just take a few seconds to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out so more students can see the videos. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and your notebook, and enjoy the video. Japan and the United States are seen as up-and-coming powers. So through the late 19th century and up through World War I, we see these two countries really gain strength, and they're going to change the existing international order somewhat, the international order that's been led by European powers for the past 200 years or so. So Japan is seen as really gaining strength and becoming a superpower in its own right by some. After World War I, we see Japan being taken seriously as a, if not world power, as a serious regional power in Asia. Japan takes part in the Washington Naval Conference. This is a disarmament conference, and Japan has a seat at the table with the other big powers in the world. Like everyone else after World War I, Japan is not happy with what they got. Italy and Japan were on the so-called winning side, but Japan basically got a few German islands in the Pacific. This is in combination with some earlier perceived slights that Japan had. One example is the Treaty of Portsmouth after the Russo-Japanese War. Japan felt like they were cheated, that they gave the Russians a pretty good beating, but did not get a fair peace settlement appropriate with what they thought they deserved. There were also some racial equality clauses that they wanted to be put into the Treaty of Versailles and other documents. This was denied by Wilson, and this made the Japanese quite unhappy with the outcomes of the Paris Peace Conference. Political and economic factors in the failure of democracy. So let's skip 10 years from 1919 to 1929. Japan was an export-centered economy. They make things in Japan and they sell them abroad. Still pretty much the way it is to this day. Japan does not have a lot of natural resources. Beautiful country, but underneath the earth, it's not blessed with a lot of valuable industrial resources. You won't see giant oil deposits. You won't see coal and iron and other metals and things of this nature that you need for an industrialized economy. So in order to mitigate the effects of the Wall Street crash and the putting up of tariff barriers, the Japanese government becomes more militaristic, imperialistic, and will invade Manchuria in 1931. Implications of military rule for Japanese expansionism. In Japan, they have a government by assassination. A lot of democratic politicians in the country are assassinated by members of the army. The army gets incredibly radicalized and right-wing and expansionist, and they are the ones who are going to, in many cases, just ignore the government, ignore Tokyo and take matters into their own hands. And this is where we see the Manchurian incident of 1931. This is where we see a lot of different expansionist moves by the Imperial Japanese Army and the Navy. The military really does, over time, take control of the government. Reasons for involvement in the Second World War. There are a few different reasons that Japan gets involved and attacks Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. Number one, they thought Germany was going to defeat the Soviet Union. So the European question was settled in their mind. If you think of Pearl Harbor, it's December 7th, 1941. The German army is about 20 miles outside of Moscow on December 7th, 1941. So it looks like their ally is going to overthrow the Soviet Union and destroy communism. So the Japanese are quite thrilled like that, kind of like buying a stock at its all-time high and then watching the company explode within the next 2 years or so. So the Japanese think their allies are doing well, and it's time for them to make a move. The oil ban by America into Japan was one issue. Like we said before, Japan does not have a lot of natural resources, and they relied on American oil to fuel their economy. Once there was sanctions on Japan for the energy exports, there was pretty much a decision that needed to be made what to do, and what they decided to do was destroy the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. Great scene at the end of The Godfather, one of the greatest movies of all time, about the bombing of Pearl Harbor and Michael Corleone going into the military. So for all you film history buffs, that's one to check out. Japanese actions in World War II were to attack everybody at all times, everywhere. They had been attacking China since the early 1930s. It is a massive task for the Japanese just to fight China, but they decide inexplicably to attack the European colonial powers, the French in Vietnam and Indochina, the British in Singapore, and then fighting the two biggest European powers and China. To top it all off, they decide to attack America. So this is... I don't know who else was left, what other big power was left. So it just seems insane looking back with hindsight, but they just started picking fights with everybody, and we can see how this all ends. It'll end with Japan's unconditional surrender and its withdrawal from China, its withdrawal from the Korean Peninsula, all of the lands that they overran, Singapore, Philippines, and so on and so forth. And of course, we know the island hopping campaign of the United States eventually puts bombers in range of the Japanese home islands, and dramatically the war ends with the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the war is over in August of 1945. So finally, going back to the main question, why did Japan become a military dictatorship? You really need to know the role of the emperor in all of this. Emperor Hirohito, young guy at the time. The Democrats lose power. They're hurt, just like the Weimar government in Germany is hurt by the Great Depression. There is a very radicalized military force assassinating Democrats and trying to impose their will, and a young emperor who theoretically can do a lot of things, but he is worried about the army openly defying him and losing face. So we see this kind of, he doesn't do much to stop all of this, but he is seen as a key person in Japan and is vital for post-war Japan, as the Americans let him keep his title and keep him on the throne in order to have a smoother reconstruction for the country.